Hello guys, these are your video notes on terrestrial biomes. So take a moment and write your aim. What conditions and organisms characterize terrestrial biomes? So as we go through these, we are talking about the terrestrial biomes. These are the ones that are land-based. Again, we're basing this on the word terrestrial, which indicates we're talking about something that occurs on the land. All right, so the first terrestrial biome you're going to be looking at is the tropical rainforest. So it gives you a breakdown of the different areas of the locations of these rainforests. So these are typically found in Central America, South America, Southeast Asia, West Africa, and other tropical regions. Tropical regions are located close to the equator and are characterized by year-round warm temperatures and near constant 12-hour days. So there's lots of time for the sun to be out to keep these places warm. So tropical rainforests receive more rain than any other biome, at least 2 meters per year, or about 6.6 feet. So that's quite a bit of rain. So nearly all nutrients present in this biome are contained in the trees, vines, and other plants, not in the soil. So this is a key characteristic of tropical rainforest. You're not going to have a lot of nutrients in the soil. They're going to be in your plant life. So any available organic material is quickly recycled by decomposers and taken up by plants. So again, this goes back to the idea of that the plants, vines, and trees contain most of the nutrients present in this biome. So continuing with tropical rainforests, a single square kilometer in a tropical rainforest can host hundreds of tree species. Tall trees form dense coverings called a canopy, which towers 50 to 80 meters above the ground. So if you look in the picture off to the side, that's what you're seeing, the tree canopy. The tallest trees pop through the canopy and make up the top layer of the rainforest, known as the emergent layer. So this layer is the top layer of the rainforest. Again, that is the emergent layer. The canopy keeps the forest dark and damp, hence rainforest. All right, so shorter trees and plants make up the understory to compete for any available light. So the understory, these are the plants below the canopy. So rainforest plants display a variety of adaptations to enable them to survive in a place where nutrients and light are in short supply. Again, nutrients are all in the different living things, mainly the plants, the plant life and the trees. So you have to get your nutrients from somewhere, and the sun is blocked out by the canopy. So in the understory region, everybody's competing for the resources. All right, so epiphytes are plants that grow on other plants instead of the soil. So if you take a note here, look at the picture, this is an example of an epiphyte. This is a plant that is growing out of another plant. These plants, such as orchids, take advantage of their host height to gain access to the sunlight. Tropical rainforests also support far more animal species than any other biome. That is going to be a key thing to remember as we go through these biomes. Rainforest birds, insects, amphibians, and other animals tend to be highly specialized, feeding on a particular kind of food or living particular sort of plant. Monkeys, for example, have long limbs and grasping prehensile tails that help them to swing easily through the canopy. So again, this goes back to the idea of resources are valuable in a rainforest. A lot of your nutrients are locked up in plants. So different animals are going to have to rely on different sources of nutrients for their food. All right, so here's another type of biome. This is the tropical dry forest. So these are tropical areas that are warm year-round, but rainfall is highly seasonal, which gives rise to tropical dry forest, or also known as tropical deciduous forests. Tropical dry forests are widespread through India, southern North America, Central America, South America, and Southeast Asia. Wet and dry seasons each span half the year. Precipitation during the wet season can be extremely heavy. Again, precipitation, this is simply the rain. Across the globe, people have converted a great deal of tropical dry forest for agriculture. So when we do this, we clear the land for farming or ranching, and it's relatively easy because the vegetation here is much shorter and the canopies are less dense than in a tropical rainforest. All right, so organisms that inhabit tropical dry forest have adapted to seasonal fluctuations in precipitation, also known as rain, and temperature. For instance, most trees in these areas are deciduous, meaning they lose their leaves and stop photosynthesis during part of the year. So this is a lot of trees that we have around here. So like oak trees, sweet gum trees, these are called deciduous. And one of the main characteristics, in the fall and winter, they lose their leaves. So some plants and trees survive by consuming food and water stored in their tissues. All right, animals must also cope with the lack of water during much of the year. When the conditions are dry, some animals enter a deep, sleep-like period of dormancy called estivation. That word is here. So this is similar to hibernation. Animals that do not enter dormancy include most bird species may migrate to areas where the water is more plentiful. So a lot of animals in this area that leave migrate to follow the resources. So when you see migrate, this is talk about we're just simply following the resources. It could be water, could also be food and other nutrients. All right, the next type of biome we're going to look at is the savanna. So these are tropical regions with less rain than tropical dry forest, but more rain than deserts. These are known as savannas or tropical grasslands. Here, grasses are interspersed with clusters of acacias and other trees. If you're confused about what type of tree that is this type of tree. Notice the way these branches and limbs form these shapes. That's a key feature of those type of trees. So frequent fires and strong winds discourage much tree growth. So you notice the trees are really spaced out here. So the savanna biome is found today across stretches of Africa, South America, Australia, India, and other dry tropical regions. Precipitation in savannas usually arrives during the distinct rainy season. The savanna soil is very porous, so water drains through it quickly. So that's a key word here. So when you hear the word porous, that just simply means the water is able to flow very quickly. This makes it more difficult for organisms to find water during the dry season. So, for instance, it's going to rain. You'll have a lot of flash flooding that happens in these areas, but the water is absorbed in the soil very quickly. So the water is on the ground for not that long before it is absorbed. As we previously mentioned, savannas often go through periods of prolonged drought, meaning there's not much water. So to cope with this, savanna plants tend to be deciduous and have an extra waxy coating. So the waxy coating helps maintain water levels. So in other words, it does not evaporate out of the plant as quickly, and it helps it conserve water. Plants here also tend to grow quickly, enabling them to recover quickly from fire damage and to make the most of the available water. So again, recovering quickly from fire is pretty self-explanatory. And then to make the use of available water, you want to do the most growing when there is water available during the wet season. So some plants, like the baobab tree or the tree of life, store water for the dry season. So if you look here at the picture, this is a picture of the baobab tree. So those are those really cool trees you often see in African movies. So let's see, as protection against herbivory, some plants develop bitter taste, rough textures, or thorns to make them less appetizing. So those are simply safeguards to protect the plants and trees from predation. All right, some facts regarding the wildlife of the savanna. So elephants can drink 100 to 200 liters of water a day. That's about 30 to 50 gallons. So when water is scarce, they have to dig for it, and they use their trunks and tusks to help them dig for water when necessary. Grazing animals such as zebras, wildebeest, gazelles, and giraffes migrate in search of water that usually gather near widely spread watering holes. So predators such as lions, hyenas, and leopards follow their migrating prey. And some small animals burrow to avoid predation and remain dormant during the dry season. Many animals only give birth during the rainy season when food and water stores are abundant. All right, our next biome is the desert biome. Deserts are the driest biome on Earth. So that is pretty self-explanatory to most, but deserts are the driest biome. So most deserts receive well under 25 centimeters of precipitation each year. That's about 9.8 inches. Much of it during isolated storms that occur months or even years apart. So very sporadic, and you can't really plan for when it rains, hence the picture. You don't see a lot of vegetation or animal life there. So depending on rainfall, deserts can vary greatly in the amount of vegetation they support. If it receives more rain, hence you'll see more vegetation. Without a lot of water, desert air tends to be very dry. Sunlight quickly heats up the dry air in the daytime, but heat is lost quickly at night. As a result, temperatures vary widely from day to night and across seasons across the year. So it's important to note deserts aren't always hot, like it's mentioning. Sometimes they'll be very hot in the day and freezing at night. Desert animals and plants have many adaptations that enable them to survive their harsh climate. Many desert animals get most of the water they need from the food that they eat, and they tend to release very concentrated urine to conserve water. Also, many animals are nocturnal, meaning they are only active in the cool of the night. So you're not going to see them out during the day. Desert mammals tend to be small and have exaggerated appendages, such as large ears to help them get rid of excess body heat. Desert plants tend to have thick, leathery leaves to help reduce water loss, and many plants, such as succulents, which you see here in the picture, store water in their tissues, such as cacti and aloe vera. The sharp, tough spines of cacti are modified leaves that discourage herbivores desperate for precious water contained within the tissues of the plant. All right, so our next biome is the temperate rainforest. So temperate rainforests occur in regions with heavy rainfall and year-round moderate temperatures. So this isn't tropical, this is temperate. The largest extent of this biome occurs in the Pacific Northwest coast of the United States. However, small bits can be found in South America and Asia. So temperate rainforests can contain a variety of different tree species, including things like cedars, spruces, hemlocks, and Douglas fir trees. These grow very tall in temperate rainforests. Many evergreen species in temperate rainforests are coniferous trees, and these are trees that produce seed-bearing cones, and they have the little spiny leaves. All right. Plants in the temperate rainforest compete for sunlight, so being tall is an advantage. The abundance of rainfall and tall trees causes the forest interior to be shaded and damp. These are perfect conditions for plants like moss, which cover most of the forest floor. Moisture-loving animals, such as the bright yellow banana slug and numerous amphibian species, are common. So again, take note of what type of animal this is. It's an animal that thrives in moist environments, hence the amphibian. If you don't notice, they secrete a very liquidy slime. So squirrels, deer, elk, and birds have a varied diet that enables them to eat whatever food is available. All right, our next type of biome is the temperate forest. So here you have broad-leaved deciduous trees that characterize the temperate forests that cover most of Europe, Eastern Asia, and Eastern United States. So that's the type of forest we have. If you look at the picture here, you'll see trees similar to what we have here in Alabama. So seasonal loss of leaves enables plants to avoid damage during harsh winter freezes. Oaks, beeches, maples are a few of the most abundant types of deciduous trees in these forests. And remember, deciduous simply means it loses its leaves part of the year. So temperate forests occur in areas where precipitation is spread relatively evenly throughout the year, meaning it's going to rain some during each season. Organisms that live in each temperate forest experience a range of temperature conditions throughout the year, from quite hot in the summer to very cold in the winter, and thus have a variety of adaptations to deal with the shifting temperatures. So this next section here illustrates how animals deal with the different temperatures. Some animals migrate to warmer areas until winter passes, while others, like black bears and some species of snake, hibernate. Hibernation is a deep, sleep-like state where the animal enters most of the winter. So this is a difference here between hibernation and estivation. So the only difference between hibernation and estivation is the type of condition that triggers the period of activity, such as cold temperatures versus lack of water. By hibernating, animals avoid expending energy looking for food in the coldest months and live off their fat stores. Animals that remain active all winter, like deer mice and eastern chipmunks, prepare for food shortages in the winter by building up their own fat reserves and hiding food for later consumption. Others, such as white-tailed deer and eastern cottontail rabbits, survive in the winter by eating the little food that is available, such as moss or tree bark. Camouflage helps animals that are active in the winter avoid predation when the lack of leaves make them more exposed. All right, our next type of biome is the temperate grasslands. So these are sometimes called prairies or steppes. These occur in regions with moderate precipitation, but not enough precipitation to support large trees common in temperate forests. Temperatures in the grasslands also tend to be more extreme than the temperate forests. Periodic fires and droughts are also common here. So temperate grasslands also cover most of central and the Midwestern United States. However, like most of the world's temperate grasslands, these regions have been almost entirely converted for agriculture to take advantage of the rich, fertile soil. Grasses have many adaptations to enable them to thrive in the temperate grasslands. Grasses, unlike most plants, grow from their bases, not from their tips. This enables them to continue growing after being grazed on by wildlife or harmed by drought or fire. Grasses use the wind to disperse their seeds. On the open plains, strong winds that could damage tall trees do not harm grassland grasses and shrubs, since they grow from their bases and not from their tips. Without trees and taller vegetation, animals in the temperate grasslands have fewer places to hide. So to account for this, some animals, such as prairie dogs, burrow underground to limit their exposure to predators. So predators of the prairie dog include things like owls, coyotes, and foxes. So animals that are larger don't have to worry about this as much. So animals like the great American bison, traveling in herds, just migrate south in the winter in search of grasses. And they don't really have to worry about predation due to their large size and the fact that they travel in herds. All right, the next biome is known as the chaparral. So conditions in the chaparral biome are highly seasonal with mild, wet winters and warm, dry summers. This type of climate is common near oceans and is found near the Mediterranean Sea in Europe and Africa. Chaparral is also located along the coast of California, Chile, southern Australia, and southern Africa. Plant life in the chaparral must be able to withstand periods of droughts. So, most common types of vegetation includes plants like shrubs, sagebrush, and small trees such as olive trees and blue oaks. Most plants have a thick, waxy leaves to help prevent water loss during the lengthy dry season. And it's important to pay attention here. Notice, guys, this is something you'll see more often, that you've seen a few times already. So in areas that have a very dry climate, A lot of times your plants will develop coatings for their leaves to help limit water loss. Chaparral communities experience frequent fires due to prolonged periods of hot temperatures and dry conditions, similar to that of deserts if there's enough plant life. Plant species here have adapted to life with or resistant to fires. Many have thick bark and deep roots that can survive fire exposures, while a few plant species actually benefit from the fires. For these species, fire can help seeds to germinate, clear away dead vegetation, or help recycle nutrients. So, this is an important area to note to see that fires are beneficial in some situations. All right. Animals living in the chaparral also must cope with hot, dry conditions, just like the plants. So, many animals, such as the pocket mouse or the Mediterranean gecko, are nocturnal, which enable them to avoid the hottest temperatures of the day. This is similar to what you saw in the desert with animals hibernating or only coming out at night. So, burrowing is common behavior here and enables animals to avoid the daytime heat and times of fire. Some animals, such as jackrabbits, have long legs and ears to help them regulate their body temperature. African elephants lack sweat glands, so heat regulation would be a real problem if it weren't for their oversized ears that help radiate excess body heat. So again, this is another area that we've talked about. Notice how the elephants have oversized ears to help them regulate their body heat. So that's a key area to pay attention to. All right, the next type of biome we're going to look at are the boreal forests. So the boreal forest, or taiga, stretches in a broad band across much of Canada, Alaska, Russia, and Scandinavia. So this is near the northern polar ice caps area. So not all the way into that region, but near the north. So these forests develop in colder, drier regions than temperate forests do. So it's going to be much colder and drier. They experience long, cold winters and short, cool summers. Species diversity here is low, meaning there's not a great variety of different types of animals or plants. Huge stretches of forest may consist of just a few species of coniferous trees, such as the black spruce. Conifers are well adapted to the harsh boreal climates, or boreal forest climate. Their conical shapes shed snow so it does not pile up on the tree branches. So that's a nice little adaptation to make note of. So as a result of the strong seasonal changes that take place, including day length, temperature, precipitation, many animals have to compress a year's worth of feeding, breeding, and rearing of young into a few warm, wet months. So, year-round residents of the boreal forest include mammals such as moose, wolves, bears, lynx, which is a type of cat, and many burrowing rodents. Boreal forest animals tend to have small extremities and thick insulation, such as fat, fur, and feathers, to avoid heat loss. Some boreal forest dwellers change colors to avoid predation in the winter. Some examples of this would be snowshoe hares and ermines, for example, grow white coats when cold temperatures bring the snow, but are mostly covered in brown fur during the summer. So you can look over here to the right, you'll see two pictures illustrating this. Notice in the winter, it will have a white coat and it will change to a mostly brown coat when it is the summer. So other animals only come to the boreal forest only for their short, mild summer. Many insect-eating birds, for example, migrate from the tropics to breed in the boreal forest once warm temperatures bring an influx of insects to feed on. When the temperatures drop again, however, they return to their warmer climates in the tropics. So here's another example of migration. All right, our next biome is known as the tundra. So again, we're staying in the cold areas. So nearly as dry as a desert, tundra occur at a very high altitude along the northern edges of Alaska, Canada, Scandinavia, and Russia. Due to its position near the North Pole, it is extremely cold and has dark winters and moderately cool, bright summers characterize this biome's climate. In the winter, when this part of the earth is aligned away from the sun, the days are very short and the temperatures are very cold. When it is angled toward the sun in the summer, the days are long and the temperatures are relatively mild. So the tundra also has very harsh winds, nutrient poor soil, and freezing temperatures that limit plant growth. The tundra supports no tall trees and only low scrubby vegetation, and ground hugging mosses and lichens. So if you look here on the picture, that's an example of the lichen. It's like a thick moss, like a grass. So because of the cold climate, under the ground soil remains frozen year round. This is known as permafrost. So permafrost is a new term here. And again, this represents the soil that remains frozen year round in the tundra. When the weather warms, the ice and soil melt and produces seasonal accumulations of surface water that make it ideal for habitats for mosquitoes and other biting insects. The swarms of biting insects benefit bird species that migrate long distances to breed during the brief but productive summer. Every year, thousands of caribou migrate to the tundra to breed, feeding off of the vast fields of lichens. Caribou are very well adapted to the cold tundra. They have thick coats packed with insulating air spaces and wide hooves that enable them to easily move across the snow and mud. Even caribou, however, leave this harsh environment for the winter. Only a few animals, such as polar bears and musk ox, can survive the year round in this extreme climate. All right, the final area we're going to look at is the polar ice regions. So these are areas that extend from the tundra to the poles. In the northern hemisphere, where the polar bears roam, there's no land beneath the ice. And in the southern hemisphere, where the penguins live, it sits upon the continent of Antarctica. So the polar ice caps are not considered a biome. So we'll make note of that. So this is not considered a biome for specific purposes, but they do not have a typical assortment of animals and plants, and much of the life does not live on the land but in the water. So there are very few plants in the polar region, though some species of algae do grow on the snow and ice. So despite these limitations, communities of life thrive in the waters of both poles. Living in the near freezing water is certainly a challenge, and some fish have evolved amazing adaptations to cope with these conditions. In the southern region, groups of fish known as notothenioids thrive. These fish have antifreeze proteins that prevent their blood from freezing. Mammals, such as seals and whales, have the advantage of thick fur or blubber to keep them warm. All right, so the final area we're going to look at are the mountain regions. So have you ever climbed a mountain before? What about going skiing? Or even just hiking up a mountain, even locally here in Alabama? If so, you might recall that climbing in elevation causes much more rapid change in climate than moving the same distance on flat ground. Like the climate, plant communities change along the slopes. It is often said that hiking up a mountain in the southwestern United States is like walking from Mexico to Canada. A hiker climbing up one of southern Arizona's higher mountains would begin in the Sonoran Desert or the desert grassland and then proceed through an oak woodland, a pine forest, and finally a spruce fir forest, the equivalent of passing through several biomes. A hiker scaling one of the greatest peaks of the Andes in Ecuador would begin in a tropical rainforest and end amid glaciers and an alpine tundra. So here is a depiction of the last slide where it went over what it would look like to start walking up a mountain. So, and it's just breaking down. On the lower end, you'd start with one biome, and as you go up, temperature and atmosphere change allows for different species of plants and animals to thrive, thus forming the different biomes that you would go through as you increase in elevation.